Okay, r/AskReddit, people who grew up rich, what did you think was normal that was not? Story number 1. I used to think having an entire floor of your house dedicated to just your shoes was totally normal. Like, I didn't even question it. Our house had this glamorous shoe room that looked like a boutique. My mom would walk in, pick out the perfect pair of Jimmy Choos or Louboutins, and just casually ask the staff to clean whatever pair she wasn't wearing. It wasn't until I went to my friend's house for the first time and saw 2 pairs of shoes in the hallway that I realized, wait, this is weird. I asked her, don't you have a place for your shoes? She gave me the most confused look and said, they go in the closet. Oh. Right. Closet. Who knew that was where regular people kept their shoes? Story number 2. There's this one thing I thought was completely normal, but it turns out it wasn't. Every summer, my family would take a private jet to Switzerland for vacation. I didn't know people didn't do this until I tried to book a flight with my best friend for a trip to California. We were looking at ticket prices, and I casually said, oh, yeah, we just take a jet, so it's all good. She stared at me like I just said we were flying on a cloud of magic dust. She said, wait, what? Private jet? And then I realized, not everyone flies on jets that aren't even commercial. So I showed up at the airport one time to board a commercial flight and I thought I was going to pass out from the sheer chaos. People fighting for seats? Lines? I wanted to run away and get back on my personal plane. Story number 3. I thought that hiring someone to clean your pool every day was just what people did. Like, every single day. Our pool wasn't even that big, but we had a guy, let's call him George, who would come by in the morning, check the chemicals, sweep out leaves, and make sure the water looked perfect. I thought that's what everyone did until one day I went to a friend's house, and their pool looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I asked them, where's your pool guy? They looked at me like I had just asked about alien life forms. Turns out, they cleaned their own pool. I still don't understand how they did it without a team to clean the filter and check the chemical balance. I'm genuinely baffled. Story number 4. I remember being about 13 years old, and my mom asked me if I wanted a pony for my birthday. Of course, I was like, sure, that sounds fun. I didn't think anything of it. A pony, no big deal. She hired a groomer, a trainer, and even got a stable built in the backyard for my birthday gift. I spent the next few weeks riding around in circles in my personal pony riding arena. But when I mentioned it to my friend, she asked if I meant a rented pony for a few hours. I looked at her like she had just asked me if I wanted to ride a unicorn. Apparently, owning a pony was not normal. Story number 5. So, there was this one time when I thought it was perfectly normal to have someone file your taxes for you, like, a whole team. We had a small army of accountants, tax specialists, and lawyers who filed our family's taxes. I didn't know there was any other way to do it. I was talking to a friend at school once, and I said, oh, I'll just have my accountant deal with my taxes. She blinked at me and said, wait, you have an accountant for taxes? You don't just do it yourself? She went on to explain that her family just used TurboTax or whatever, and I nearly fainted. How were people filing taxes on their own? Wasn't that like running your own legal company? How was that even possible without a team? Story number 6. Growing up, every room in our house had an air purifier. I didn't realize this wasn't the norm until I stayed at my friend's house and realized they didn't have a single one. I asked, where's your air purifier? And they said, we have windows. I looked at her like she was speaking in some mysterious foreign language. What do you mean, windows? Like, a whole room full of open windows? Apparently, people just live without air purifiers and air conditioning that has separate zones for every room. It was baffling. It still is. Story number 7. I remember the first time I realized I didn't have a normal relationship with money. I was about 15, and I got a checkbook for my birthday, like, a whole real checkbook with my name on it. I was so excited to write checks. It felt very adult. Then one day I tried to buy a pair of jeans at the mall. I handed the cashier my checkbook and said, "Just put it through." She stared at me for a solid minute before I realized that checks weren't normal. My mom wrote them for things like groceries, but I didn't get that people actually had debit cards that didn't require you to write out a whole paper trail. It's honestly amazing I didn't bankrupt myself in the process. Story number 8, we had this thing where every holiday, Christmas, Easter, even Labor Day, we'd have a giant party in our backyard. The theme was always something ridiculous: Hawaiian luau extravaganza, Casino Royale night, whatever. We'd hire a full catering team, set up a stage for live music, and have a fireworks display, and this was just for a Sunday barbecue. I invited a friend from school one time and she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Wait, you just throw parties for no reason?" I thought she was joking. I mean, every weekend was a party at our house. We had a hot tub, a private mini golf course in the backyard, and a clown for kids' parties. I didn't realize it wasn't completely normal to have personal fireworks whenever you wanted. Story number 9, I never thought twice about the elevator in our house. It was just there, you know? If you didn't want to walk upstairs, you'd press the button and ride up. I didn't realize this wasn't exactly a common thing until I stayed at a friend's house for the first time. I went to head upstairs, pressed the wall, like I'd always done, and stood there like an idiot for a solid minute. Her mom asked what I was doing and I just said, "Waiting for the elevator." She looked at me like I had 12 heads and said, "We have stairs." Oh. Right. Yeah, normal. Normal people have stairs. Story number 10, when I was a kid, we used to get these absurdly extravagant gift baskets for Christmas. The kind with gold-wrapped chocolate, truffles, the best kind of wine, those weird tiny cans of caviar. I remember one year I was super excited about it and took the basket over to a friend's house, thinking she'd be just as thrilled. She took one look at it and asked, "What is all this weird stuff?" I was like, "It's from Hampers of the World." She stared at me blankly. Apparently, it wasn't normal to have $500 gift baskets. Story number 11, I had no idea renting a vacation home was something people actually paid for. It never occurred to me that my family's lake house wasn't something everyone had access to. For us, it was just there. My mom would call ahead to have fresh towels ready when we arrived, and my dad would throw down a credit card to get some new skis shipped. One year, I invited a couple of friends to our cabin, and they just stared at me like I'd invited them to a castle. Turns out, most people don't casually own multiple vacation homes. Story number 12, when I was little, I used to just toss my clothes into the laundry basket and expect them to come back freshly pressed and perfectly folded. It wasn't until I went to college and saw my roommate actually do her own laundry that I realized I was living in some kind of parallel universe. She asked me when I was going to take care of my laundry, and I looked at her like, "What, do you expect me to carry it somewhere?" I had a laundry service. A luxury service. It took care of everything. She said, "Wow, you're living like a queen." I guess so. Story number 13, my mom used to make calls to the chef before we went on vacation to make sure there was something special waiting for us when we got there. It wasn't that we couldn't find restaurants, we just always assumed someone would do the work for us. I honestly thought everyone had their own personal chef. I didn't think it was anything weird until one day in high school, I was talking about it, and my friend started laughing. She thought I was joking. I couldn't understand why she thought it was funny, but then I realized she cooked. Story number 14, I remember being absolutely shocked the first time I had to actually fill out a tax form. Like, I didn't know how it worked at all. My parents had an accountant who just took care of everything, and every year we'd get a check for whatever we were owed. When it came time for me to do it myself as an adult, I looked at the form and thought I was staring at a foreign language. My first instinct was to call my mom, but then I realized that was not normal. Story number 15, we had a wine cellar in our house. Not a wine rack, not a wine fridge, an entire room dedicated to wine. This wasn't just for special occasions, it was a daily part of life. When I turned 18, I tried to bring a couple of friends over, casually mentioning the wine cellar. They thought I was talking about a cabinet or maybe a closet. When I showed them the actual room, they went quiet. I guess not everyone's parents just have a secret room full of expensive bottles of wine. Story number 16. There was this one time I went over to a friend's house, and we were talking about how we get around. She casually mentioned, "Oh, my parents always make me take the bus." I didn't even know what to say because, in my world, buses weren't a thing. I mean, we had drivers, people with uniforms and fancy cars. My walking consisted of gliding across the floor from one wing of the house to the other. So I asked her, "What's the bus like? Is it like a limo, but with a bunch of people?" She gave me a look like I had just asked her if she knew what dirt was. Story number 17. I remember when I was about 14, my family rented out a private island for a week. My mom thought it'd be fun for my birthday. I had no idea that renting a whole island wasn't something normal people did. When I told a friend about it later, she looked at me like I was from another planet. She asked me, "What do you mean a private island? Like, a whole island?" I tried to explain that we had private chefs, a personal guide, and a full staff on hand, but it just made things worse. The more I talked about it, the weirder it seemed. They didn't even have a backyard to play in, and I was out here thinking that renting a literal island was just another family trip. Story number 18. For the longest time, I thought it was completely normal to fly to Paris for lunch. I know, it sounds crazy, but we had this tradition in my family where we'd pick a city, fly there for a meal, and come back for lunch. I genuinely thought this was how everyone lived until I invited my best friend to Paris for her birthday. Story number 19. It was third grade when I first found out not everyone has a full-time art tutor. I remember I was talking to my class about how I had an art lesson after school and someone asked, "Wait, how many lessons do you have a week?" I just said, "Oh, I get them every day. My tutor comes in the afternoons and helps me paint." The class went silent. One girl finally asked, "You have a painting tutor every day?" And I said, "Yeah, it's so much fun. My parents want me to be an artist." I had no idea that having your own personal tutor to teach you how to paint, sculpt, and draw wasn't something everyone got. At the time, I thought every kid had one. Story number 20. We used to get hand-delivered invitations to exclusive galas, like handwritten notes in gold foil. They were always fancy, and you had to RSVP because they were for high-profile charity events or something. I thought it was normal to get these on a regular basis until I invited a friend to one of these events, and she looked at me like I was insane. She asked, "Wait, what? You get invited to galas?" She genuinely thought I was joking. And when I said, "Well, of course. You just RSVP, put on something fancy, and go," she looked at me like I had just announced that I was a royal. I didn't realize that having gala invites delivered to your house on silk paper wasn't standard for everyone. Story number 21. When I was a kid, we always went snowboarding in the Alps during the winter holidays. It was just what we did. The idea of renting a cabin or even staying at a hotel never occurred to me. We had this massive chalet, complete with staff to cook, clean, and serve us. I remember telling a friend about it once, and they asked, "Wait, you're saying you just go to the Alps every year?" I replied, "Yeah, we go every Christmas. It's basically tradition." They stared at me in silence. Then, after a while, they said, "You're saying you have a whole house in the Alps for just vacation?" I laughed, thinking they were messing with me, but they weren't. Apparently, this was not something regular people did. Who knew? Story number 22. At one point, I thought it was normal to have a water fountain in your backyard. Like an actual Italian marble fountain that played soft classical music. I didn't even realize that not everyone's house came with its own garden orchestra. One of my friends came over to my house and asked, "Wait, what is that sound?" I casually replied, "Oh, that's just the fountain. We got it imported last year." She blinked at me and said, "Imported from Italy? just for a fountain? That's really extra. I guess not everyone has a musical marble fountain as a normal backyard feature. Who knew? Story number 23. There was a time when I thought waking up in a different country every month was something that everyone did. We'd go on these spontaneous trips for no reason at all, just to visit a random country or eat at some exclusive restaurant. I was in high school before I realized that not every family just picked a country, hopped on a plane, and went. I was telling a friend about this trip we were taking to Greece, and she asked, "Wait, how do you just decide to go to another country?" I was so confused. "You just buy the tickets, pack, and go. No big deal." She stared at me, totally dumbfounded. Apparently, not everyone had the means, or the inclination, to just pick a random place on the map and go there. Story number 24. When I was little, I thought it was completely normal to have a personal stylist. I didn't think anything of it. Every time we went to a store, we'd have someone pick out clothes for me, tell me what I should wear, and even alter them right on the spot. It was just part of life. One day I was telling a friend about this, and she asked, "Wait, a personal stylist? For clothes?" I looked at her like she had asked if I was speaking in an alien language. "Yeah, that's what happens when you're rich," I said nonchalantly. She looked at me like I had just told her I lived in a mansion made of candy. Apparently, having a personal stylist isn't something most people do.